The head wrap is prominently worn with people of color in the continent of Africa. It serves several significant meanings. First and foremost, it serves as a protector to the head from the extreme sun rays. It is also considered a part of your dress or attire. It is an accessory. Just as one would wear a tie, and Mr. Ferguson doesn't have his on today, but that's okay, or suit or earrings. In some areas of Africa, it identifies a woman's status or position, much like a business suit that some of you gentlemen have one today. But according to some African traditions, it's also used like the wedding ring. It tells if a woman is single, married, or widowed. But lastly, and most importantly, it is proudly worn to signify one region or village from which a woman resides. East, west, north, south of Africa. You can tell by the different patterns and colors associated with her particular attire. But most importantly, it is a proud identifier of a Black woman's crown. The crown displays her pride, her strength, and her beauty. Good morning, everyone, and welcome. It's great to see each of you this morning, as well as I'm honored to stand here for such a momentous and exciting occasion. Today is the day to be on the campus of LCC as we kick off a dynamic season that will commemorate, educate, and celebrate the many contributions and accomplishments of African Americans who have made and are making to the fabric of America. My name is Angela Matthews. I am one of the board of trustees of LCC. And this is a magnificent and educational institution that is becoming a model for other colleges, community colleges in the state of Michigan and in the nation. It has and it continues to change the trajectory of lives who dare to hope for better lives and for better futures. And to use the infamous quote from our illustrious Governor Gretchen Whitmer, and who wants to get it done. So, okay, here we go. To be honest, I'm excited. I'm so excited. I don't even know what to do. Because, see, there's a lot to say about the 400 years of African American Commission Act, and you will hear about that a little bit later. So, but for right now, I would just like to, recognize and honor and thank some people. So would you bear with me for a minute? Can you do that? All right. First of all, I'd like to acknowledge our chair of the LCC Board of Trustees, Mr. Lawrence Hildago. And then we have a board member, LCC trustee, which is Dr. Robert Proctor, who's here. I thank this exceptional leader whose heart beats for this college and his care and passion for our students, and that is Dr. Brent Knight. I also would like to recognize and thank our sponsor, because without them, this would not even happen. Case Credit Union, where are your representatives at? Where are you? We like to thank you. Thank you so much. Now, here's the part where it gets a little tricky, and I may get in trouble, but you forgive me, I'm going to ask for it in the beginning. So we are pleased to have quite a few elected officials here today. But we want to thank our illustrious Mayor Andy Shore. He is in the community, he shows up, he supports. Thank you so much, and his beautiful wife. Yeah. It says, he that finds a wife finds a good thing and favor. So the favor comes with Aaron. That's right. So also, we have other elected officials that are here, and I don't want to botch this up. So please, ma'am, please, sir, gentlemen, if you would stand and let us recognize you, that would be awesome. There's our councilman. Yes. Now, I am pleased there are so many people who work behind the scenes to ensure that LCC functions at an optimal level in the education arena. So if you are an administrator, if you are staff, if you are faculty, I want you to stand. LCC. Yes. Thank you so much for your contributions and what you do every single day. Now, I know you guys are important, but there are some other important people that are in this room, and that is our students. Where are the students at? Where are the students? Students. Students. Soon to be students over here. We have a very important person here today. She's traveled far, and she is the niece of Malcolm X. And so I would like to introduce and say thank you to Ms. Deborah Jones. Could you please stand? Thank you so much for the legacy of your uncle. All right. Now, there's a very special group who have become like family. And what they've done over the past, maybe 6 or 8 months is they've met once a week on a Tuesday on their lunch hour, volunteering to make sure that everything here just went off without a hitch. So I want to introduce to you the 400-year African American Commission Committee for LCC. If you would stand, if you were here, please stand. Please stand. They worked hard on some niblets. Now, we also want to pay honor and respects to a very important member of this committee, and that's Dr. Tanya Bailey. She is our Chief Diversity Officer, and she's voluntold us to do a whole bunch of things. So we just want to, definitely recognize her here as well. Anybody know who Richard Theodore Greener is? He was the first Black to graduate from Harvard College and Dean of the University Law of Howard. Sorry about that. James Meredith. Heard of him? Okay. Civil rights activist, became the first African American to go to the University of Mississippi in 1962. Let me see if you know who Ruby Bridges is. No, Miss Ruby? She was the first African American child to attend an all-white elementary school in the South. Where are your cell phones at? You know you have them. They're hooked to your hip. You don't leave home without them. Got your cell phones? I want you to meet Dr. Henry T. Sampson, inventor of cell phone technology, to which the first cell phone call was placed April 3rd, 1973 by Motorola engineer Marty Cooper. What am I getting at? The half has not been told. We culminate a lot into February, Black History Month, but there's so much more to be told. Nobel Peace Prize winner, revolutionary, human rights activist, and great South African president Nelson Mandela said this: education is the most powerful weapon you can use to change the world. And to connect his other quote, he says the power of education extends beyond the development of skills we need for economic success. It can contribute to nation building and reconciliation. So all of you who are here today, thank you so much. Your time, you felt it was worthy to come. But see, let's go beyond Black History Month and let's commemorate, educate, and celebrate Black history moments. So I want you to take a look at this awesome creative video. There was a dynamic LCC media team that put this together, and I hope you enjoy it.
Arriving in late August 1619 on the English ship the White Lion, the first African set foot in the United States. In 2018, the National Act, H.R. 1242, was signed into law. This bill established the 400 Years of African American History Commission to develop and carry out activities throughout the United States to commemorate the 400th anniversary of the arrival of Africans in the English colonies at Point Comfort, Virginia.
LCC got involved with the National Act to commemorate 400 years of African American history by way of community conversations.
We have an obligation to educate, to commemorate, and also to acknowledge those that have been instrumental to our history.
Lansing Community College has joined the National Act by creating an initiative to educate our community, commemorate triumph in the face of great adversity, and celebrate the significant impact and sweeping cultural and societal achievements African Americans have made in this country.
Well, we hope that this initiative will bring the community together. We hope that it'll have an impact in the ways that will educate our upcoming generation, our future leaders, and also bring faculty, staff, and our surrounding community to be informed about an important history in our lives, which is the African American contributions.
Throughout the last 400 years, many significant movements have framed the existence of African Americans in our country. Slavery, Jim Crow, the Civil War, and the Civil Rights Movement are all instrumental in the African American story. From the horrific slave era to segregation during Jim Crow, African Americans dealt with unimaginable prejudice and racial inequality. The Civil War began the movement to extend equality to African Americans. Fighting with hope for a new future, roughly 179,000 African Americans served with distinction in a number of battles. The Civil Rights Movement was an organized effort by Black Americans to end racial discrimination and gain equal rights under the law.
We couldn't have education, we couldn't read, we couldn't write. Well, look at where we are today. LCC is a campus full of diversity where we can be an accomplished and do anything that we want to do. I'm so glad that we're talking about the significance of the Civil War, because without the involvement of African Americans in the Civil War, then it would not have been won. And I think that our kids, regardless to what background or education, needs to understand that importance of history, that it was because of our involvement, our ancestral involvement, that we are free today. When we talk about the Jim Crow laws, a time when we were segregated, we couldn't eat at the same counters, we couldn't use the same bathrooms, we couldn't drink out of the same faucet, we couldn't live in the same areas and homes. But today, you know, Blacks and whites and Asians, Latinos, we can all come together in one same place, and we're all equal. The Civil Rights Movement is important because it not only was rights that were gathered for African Americans, but others are able to bear the contributions of that as well. Today, you know, in our own ways, we're kind of still fighting for the right to vote, having the right to exercise that one power if that's something that a person doesn't think that they have and that makes a difference. So the Civil Rights Movement was able to bring that about.
To have Lansing Community College recognize the history and the contributions of African Americans is personal to me. It makes me feel as if I matter, that I'm a part of this heritage, and I'm a part of this culture. And it also means that my culture will never be forgotten. Thank you, LCC.
Our 400 Years of African American History Commission will explore each of these eras through dynamic events, art and cultural exhibits, lectures and discussions, and community summits.
Thank you, LCC Media Team. That was absolutely amazing. And so now we come to another good part. I would like to acknowledge another board member, Mr. Andrew Abood. Thank you for so much. So you may be wondering, also thank you, LCC Foundation members. I see you in here. Thank you so much. So we're wondering, what is this 400 years? What is this about? So what is all the fanfare and the hoopla? So let me give you just a little bit of history. 1619 to 2019, that's 400 years. 1619, when the first 20 Africans arrived here in the United States. And so there is a commission called HR 1242. The 115th Congress established this commission act to say it's time for you to talk about history. Don't just culminate it into 1 month. From January of 2019 all the way through to July 2020, talk about history. Talk about the contributions. Talk about the accomplishments, because it's interwoven and interconnected to all of us. We're talking about Black history. We're talking about those accomplishments, but everyone is benefiting from it. And it could not have been done if all of us didn't come together to get it done, to move history forward to the present and hopefully in the future. So give yourselves a hand. So what LCC has done is we're going to extend this. This is the kickoff for it. We have so much that's going on the campus of the main campus as well as West Campus. Next month, we have a women's luncheon where we will honor African-American women. Dr. Eva Evans, Representative Sarah Anthony, and our late, great, the first African-American female, Shirley Rogers, and you'll hear a little bit more about her later. Then we have in April, Angie Thomas, The Hate U Give. Saw the movie, read the book, One Read, One Book, LCC. She's going to be right here on this campus. Then there's other things. Juneteenth will come about in June. Lots going on. So please, ma'am, please, sir, don't just relegate yourself to February. Check out those events. Check us out on campus. Check it out in the community. Let's learn some more, because the more we learn about each other, the more we are open to one another, and the more we are accepting and receiving of one another. You with me? All right. So right about now, I'm going to bring up one of our staff, a success coach. She's awesome and amazing, and she's going to talk about the legislative tribute. Let's give a hand clap for Miss Angela Hook.
Well, good afternoon. My name is Angela Hook, and I am extremely excited about this celebration of the 400 years of African American history. Commemorate, educate, and celebrate. It is my honor and privilege to present a legislative tribute from our very own state representative, Sarah Anthony, and State Senator Curtis Hertel. Because the House and Senate are in session on today, they send their regrets that they cannot be here in person to present this tribute. I would like to read this tribute, which says, "Special Tribute, Lansing Community College. Let it be known that it is with great admiration for the 400 years of African American History Commission Act that we congratulate Lansing Community College. With the commemoration of centuries of African American history, LCC has demonstrated the highest level of altruism and support for our community. The celebration of African American history will start by honoring Malcolm X, a Lansing resident, with a portrait unveiling. Malcolm X was the spark that ignited many individuals' passion for activism, which eventually birthed the organization of Afro-American Unity. The magnitude of the legacy left by Malcolm X can still be felt on today. He was instrumental to the progress of the civil rights movement and a powerful advocate for both African Americans and members of the Islamic religion. Malcolm X bravely inspired a generation to stand up and fight for human rights. The entirety of this wonderful event will be the celebration to centuries of contributions made by African Americans, as well as honor the rich history of African Americans in our country. The efforts to LCC to increase awareness and understanding of African American culture are truly commendable. We extend our gratitude and appreciation to all the individuals responsible for making this event possible. President Knight, Tanya Bailey, and Angela Matthews. They serve as stellar examples of selflessness. They will continue to help educate all those around them and stand apart as leaders in our community. And special tribute. Therefore, this document is signed and dedicated to the honor of Lansing Community College. May this celebration of this organization sought to share with others be returned many times over. We would like to thank Representative Anthony and Center Hotel for acknowledging today's celebration and for their public service on the behalf of Lansing Community College. At this time, we would like to bring up Robert Proctor as he gives remarks. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon once again. On behalf of the Board of Trustees of Lansing Community College, I extend to you a warm welcome and our heartfelt thanks for your attendance at this event. This is a historic event in Lansing and throughout the country. I'm going to remove my glasses so I can see better. We're celebrating the kickoff of a year of learning about the 400 years of history of persons of African descent living in what is now the United States of America. LCC is proud to be part of the national initiative stemming from Public Law number 115-102, which established the 400 Years of African American History Commission that is charged with developing and carrying out activities throughout the United States to commemorate the 400th anniversary of the arrival of Africans in the English colonies in 1619. As a college like no other, LCC is committed to serving the learning needs of a changing community, including providing opportunities for cultural enrichment across the broadest of spectrums. LCC believes it is important to not only acknowledge the contributions of persons of African descent or African Americans in this country, but also to increase awareness about the impact slavery, the Civil War, Jim Crow laws, de facto racial discrimination, and the civil rights movement have had on our nation. In order to continue our journey towards a more perfect union, it is critical for us to understand from where we have come. Again, LCC is committed in this initiative to create awareness of the sacrifices made by so many that helped transform our nation from a segregated society to one that is striving, still striving, to become that more perfect union. As an aside, my family and I have traveled to Williamsburg. We did that last October. We visited historic Williamsburg, Yorktown, and Jamestown, the site of the arrival of 20 persons from Africa in 1619. Those 20 human beings did not come here as slaves, though many of them may have been indentured servants. They later became enslaved people. I trust you understand the difference. It is now my pleasure and privilege to introduce a president like no other, LCC President, Dr. Brent Knight.
Thank you, Trustee Proctor. Delighted that all of you are here today. It's a privilege to be the president of Lansing Community College, especially as we celebrate this milestone. I'd like to thank all who made this event possible, especially Trustee Matthews and Tanya. I believe that a community college is the people's college. By that I mean all the people in the community. Prior to the creation of community colleges in the 1960s, higher education was not practical for some of the people, especially people of color. We at Lansing Community College strive to be an inclusive college, to cause everyone in the community to think well of the college, take advantage of all the college has to offer, to be inspired, and feel that this is their college and that all are welcome here. At Lansing Community College, we teach hundreds of courses, including history. I like to teach geography, but those who know me, I especially like to teach history too. Americans in general have a short memory, often struggle placing the Civil War in the right time period, not quite sure when the Great Depression happened, and there's a line in a popular song, "Don't know much about history." Today, I think that most Americans think that racial discrimination was largely something that happened in the South. You've seen the photos of separate drinking fountains, the back of the bus, signs with racial connotations, and of course, the Klan. The Klan was also active in Michigan, and there was a similar parallel racist organization in Michigan, the Black Legion. It was thought that the Black Legion killed more than 50 people. Membership in the Black Legion included many elected officials and perhaps the police chief of the city of Detroit. The Black Legion was especially active in Michigan in the 1930s. Yes, there was considerable discrimination in the North, in Michigan, and in Lansing. My topic today is racial discrimination in Lansing prior to 1960. What life was like in Lansing for people of color in the 1950s. I thank Robert Proctor, Fred Porter, and Joel Ferguson for helping me with this topic. The question that I asked them was, tell me about racial discrimination in Lansing prior to 1960. It's especially important today because those were the discriminatory circumstances which Malcolm X, Malcolm Little, faced in this community when he lived here. Most of us hear about the first black person in one job or another, the first black elected official on one board or another. Yes, that was the case, but to say it in a different way, that means that there were only white people in these positions before, and that people of color were discriminated against. That means that there was ongoing discrimination and that it had been ongoing for many years in Lansing and other communities in Michigan. Discrimination, one way or another, sometimes subtle, sometimes not so subtle. For example, I learned that maybe no one ever passed a test for a particular job. Those who graded the test made sure that people of color did not pass the test, regardless of how well they did in taking the test. There were no black police officers, no black firefighters, nor black bus drivers prior to the 60s. There were no black members of the city council or the school board or other elected posts either. The first black member of the Lansing City Council is here today, Joel Ferguson. He was elected to the Lansing City Council in 1967. Lansing was a very bustling community downtown in the 50s. If you were in downtown Lansing in the 50s, you did not see a black person in the front of any establishment, because the only place that they could be was in the back of the house, in lesser jobs, lesser pay. The country club had no black members. There were no black teachers or administrators in the public schools. The first African American to work for the state of Michigan in Lansing didn't happen until the 1950s. You could work on the assembly line at General Motors, Fisher Body, or Oldsmobile, but it was unlikely that you would work in skilled trades or in a white-collar job at General Motors in Lansing. Racial jokes could be told in the workplace, social integration was not likely, and no one would do anything about it. That was just the way it was. Unlikely that you would be a journeyman tradesman like an iron worker, millwright, or a pipe fitter. Likely that if you were black, you would be relegated to a support role such as carrying bricks or mortar, making and hauling mortar, rather than the journeyman job of bricklayer, which paid a whole lot more. In that era, those jobs were passed from fathers to sons, and if your father was black, that meant that you were not likely to become a skilled tradesman. There was considerable redlining as to where black people could live in Lansing. The lenders and the realtors simply made it impossible for black families to live outside of their prescribed parts of the community. Often a river or a thoroughfare was the dividing line. Blacks could not purchase real estate or live in East Lansing at all, outside of the residence halls at Michigan State. East Lansing hired their first black teacher in 1961, which means there were none before. With redlining, you would then get schools which were 95% Caucasian. I am told that Lansing Eastern High School was especially white. Persons of color were to attend Lansing Central High School. If you drove your car outside of the black neighborhood, quite possibly you would be pulled over for taillight issues. In other words, stay in your part of town. Also, I'm told you were not welcome in East Lansing after dark. Prior to the 60s, there were very few black professionals in the community, few attorneys, physicians, or dentists. There was what was called the Green Book for Lansing. The Green Book stated which boarding houses were safe for people of color to sleep, the name of a bar where you would be welcome and be served, and again, be safe. The Green Book provided names of dry cleaners who would appreciate your business. If you went to a bar outside of those listed in the Green Book, it would be likely that you would not be served. Yes, in Lansing, people of color were simply welcome in some establishments and not in others. Often, blacks did not feel welcome at the hospital and gave birth at home instead. There were several roller skating rinks in the community, one in Holt, one near Frandor. Blacks were allowed one night a week only and were not welcome at other times. The same with Lake Lansing. Blacks were allowed to swim at the park at Lake Lansing on a designated day only. You were allowed at the amusement park at Lake Lansing only on a designated day. We live in a nation of 50 states and a federal government, so sometimes federal or nationwide policies were racist, and they impacted everyone, including people of Michigan. For example, blacks could not pilot or work on commercial aircraft prior to the 1960s. In 1941, there were 12,000 African Americans in the Army and 12 black officers. During World War II, people of color were typically in support roles such as porters, cooks, waiters, grave diggers, truck drivers, and stewards. There were no black women in the Navy until 1945. The Marines had one black officer out of 12,000 officers. In 1947, after the war, the Marines declared that black Marines could either resign or become stewards or cooks. Harry Truman from Missouri, was President of the United States from 1945 until 1953. His grandparents on both sides were slave owners. Truman used the N-word and told racist jokes. He condemned racial violence towards black soldiers, however, and signed into law the integration of the armed forces in 1948. Although it was signed into law in 1948, it took many years for the military to achieve integration. So we're gathered here today to remember our history, as uncomfortable as it might be, and continue to work at inclusion. For Malcolm X, his father's home, their family home, was burned to the ground, probably by the Black Legion or the Ku Klux Klan. Some in the community did not want a black family to live in that home. Also, his father was brutally murdered in Lansing. Although under different circumstances, both Martin Luther King and Malcolm X paid the ultimate price for their civil rights activism and leadership. While preparing for today, I thought about daily discrimination and how it felt in Lansing. I can only imagine. Discrimination was omnipresent. You could only work under these circumstances. You could only live in these places. You could only go to these schools. You could only swim in specific places on specific days. If you or a loved one became sick, the hospital may not welcome you. It was unsafe in some places after dark. Daily reminders of discrimination. You had few professional role models. If you did not follow the prescribed rules, harassment and violence was possible. Few, if anyone, who looked like you had blazed a trail you could follow. Yes, I could understand how one might become enraged and become determined to do something about it to overcome. I mentioned earlier that I think Lansing Community College is a college for all the people, and we believe in inclusion. And I have privileges in my job, including the opportunity to do my part to foster inclusion and sometimes teach history. In my 11 years as president of Lansing Community College, I've led an effort to place more than 1,200 images on the walls of this college. Many of those are about ambient learning, just absorbing what you see. I'd like to mention a few of them. In the Arts and Sciences building, you'll find the Underground Railroad classroom. That is an entire classroom that displays how the Underground Railroad worked in Michigan. Across the hall from the Underground Railroad classroom, you'll find the Women's Suffrage classroom. And a few steps from that classroom, there's another, Noteworthy Latinos. When you walk in the front door of the Arts and Sciences building, you'll see artwork from an acclaimed local artist, Brian Whitfield. The title of that work is Midnight Saturday Night. On the second floor, you will encounter my favorite in the entire building, that being a large replica of a telegram from the University of Mississippi to James Meredith informing him of his admission. Next to it, you'll find an image of Thurgood Marshall, who was next to Rosa Parks, who is just down the hall from several images of Martin Luther King. If you go on the third floor, you'll see another considerable image of Thurgood Marshall as a member of the United States Supreme Court. On the fourth floor, you can find an image of Martin Luther King and Lyndon Johnson engaged in an intense conversation. On the north end of the building, you'll find a lovely oil portrait of a Native American woman and her daughter engaged in a powwow. There is one photograph of an athlete in the Arts and Sciences building, that being Jackie Robinson. In the Mackinac building, just across the way, if you go there, and I encourage you to, you'll encounter an image of Nelson Mandela the size of a Volkswagen, and across from it, a considerable photo of Oprah Winfrey. On the second floor of this building, you'll find the gay pride flag, and just outside the door of this room, you can see the image of Hitsville, USA. All of that, just some of our work at Inclusion, large and small, have led us to the portrait that we will unveil today. Leading up to this, a question I asked myself over and over was, how could we create an image? What would the image be? We wanted it to be striking, awesome, remarkable. What could we do that would be the most significant statement that we could make to demonstrate inclusion and offer inspiration? I wanted to strike at the heart of the beast and include a prominent African American man. And I'd like that image to be in a prominent place in the college, the place with the most foot traffic in the college. I wanted a successful, serious black male, somebody who would clearly state, I am somebody. I made myself into somebody. I am studied. I have studied. A great oil portrait of a black man would clearly say to all passersby, I am a proud black man, a person of consequence. When I talked with Trustee Proctor, Joel Ferguson, and Fred Porter, they said in many ways when they were growing up, they had few role models, few who blazed a trail, there were few to follow. Few examples of people of color who were successful, and in some ways, more discouragement than encouragement. I wanted a great oil portrait, beautifully done, full size, serious man of color, and someone from this community. I consulted with the people I work for, the Board of Trustees, and they agreed that an oil painting of Malcolm X would be a good idea for Lansing Community College. It's my privilege today to unveil a great portrait, a portrait that will last for hundreds of years. Whatever we say today will be remembered for a few days, maybe a line or two for a few months. But this oil painting will last through countless generations. And just maybe, it will inspire students who attend this college today, but especially thousands of students not yet born, to pass by this painting and to say to themselves, I look like him. That guy was somebody, and maybe I could be somebody too. Next, we had to find and retain an artist who would do a great job at painting Malcolm X. We needed a great oil painting, not an average oil painting. I had read how Joshua Risner painted a portrait of the first black member of the Michigan legislature, William Ferguson. He was elected for the Michigan House of Representatives in 1893 and in 1895. I thought that was a great portrait. It hangs in the Michigan Capitol. We have a copy of that painting here today. I encourage you to visit the real portrait in the state capitol. This is a good copy, but the real one's a lot better. Joshua is artist in residence at the state capitol. Joshua accepted my challenge to paint a great full-size oil portrait of Malcolm X for Lansing Community College. Finding good photographs of Malcolm X that we could use in making this oil painting was not easy, but Joshua overcame, did his research. When you see this, he imagined, and you can see his imagination in this painting. He designed and painted this stunning oil portrait. Joshua, let us unveil. I encourage all of you to come up close to this painting. I find it to be remarkable and stunning, and I'm especially proud. Mayor Andy Shore.
You're here. Okay. Boy, I don't know how to follow that. That is just magnificent. So I really, you know, I'm proud to be the mayor of this city. I'm proud to have LCC here. I actually thought I was going to be late, but Supervisor of Lansing Township, DeAndre Hayes, and I were supposed to be meeting at 1, so we're both here. So we're not late anymore, so I feel better. But, you know, I was asked to just come up and say very, very briefly a few words, but really everything's been said. Dr. Knight, Angela, everybody who was involved in this portrait, in addition to everything that you just told us that LCC is doing, shows the incredible power of Lansing. And I cannot be more proud, especially today, to be the mayor. Thank you all for being here.
David Seawick.
Thank you. And Joshua, that is an incredible portrait. It really is. In all honesty, I saw it a little while ago, and I happened to catch Dr. Knight one day walking into the administration building, and it's incredible to see it again. It really is. And I was asked to speak just briefly about Malcolm X and as a tribute to him. And I've taught history here for a lot of years, and one of the subjects I've always taught to my students is Malcolm X, and I've done it really for two reasons. One, because he connects to students. He connects to them to the past, connects students to the past. And the reason why he does is because precisely what's been talked about today, his story. And his story is not only a Lansing story, but of course it is a Lansing story, but it really is part of the American experience for African Americans who grew up during the time period that he did. And quite a few things have already been said about Malcolm X today, including what Dr. Knight mentioned, and that is that there was an episode in his childhood where the family home was burned, probably by the Black Legion. I actually live in the neighborhood where that house stood. The house I live in was built right after World War II, and when it was built, it was mostly farms in that neighborhood. It's, for those of you that aren't familiar with Lansing, it's actually right by where the airport is nowadays. The neighborhood between the south side of Grand River Avenue and the river, Grand River, that neighborhood there. And the local connections to Malcolm X are everywhere here. My students are always amazed that this incredible figure from history that they probably have heard of in one capacity or another was from here, or grew up here, spent a substantial portion of his childhood here. But the other reason why I teach Malcolm X to my students, and will continue to do so as long as I'm fortunate enough to teach here, is that the ideas that he left us are still very pertinent, and they speak to a long story of race and America's racial identity and America's identity as a whole in terms of how whites and blacks live with each other, and how African Americans have been an essential part of American history since this country was founded, but yet at the same time have not always had an equal seat at the table. And Malcolm X was not very old when he died. He was younger than I am, actually. He was 39 years old when he was assassinated in New York City at the Audubon Ballroom. And the last period of his short life, he himself underwent a tremendous transformation, actually. So Malcolm X was incarcerated for armed robbery in the state of Massachusetts. And while he was in prison, he was converted to the Nation of Islam. And after he was paroled, he became one of the most important members of the Nation of Islam in the United States. And during the 1950s and into the early 1960s, while he was involved in that organization, this was a group that really scared a lot of people, to put it bluntly. And Malcolm X himself ended up leaving the Nation of Islam, and he later converted to what he called in his book Orthodox Islam. Sunni Islam is what we would understand it as. And an important part of his maturation as a person was when he took the pilgrimage, the Hajj, to Mecca, which is an important tenet of the Islamic faith. And while there, he experienced something that he had never seen in the United States before. And that was people that were white and black and every color in between living together and being involved in a very powerful spiritual event together. And Malcolm X came back to the United States, and he was interviewed by many journalists. And whereas before he had preached that the separation of the races in the United States was inevitable because of America's racist history, after he came back from this trip, he said that white Americans and black Americans could live together if they reached a spiritual unity. And it was a spiritual unity that he believed would come about when Americans came to grips with their racist past and sought to remedy that. And that was one of the ideas that I think was most important that Malcolm X left. And again, his life was cut short. And so his legacy followed him, though, long after he was alive. And in tribute to Malcolm X, we have this painting here which will last, I think, for a very long time. And as somebody, again, who teaches Malcolm X here, I have no doubt this painting will form the beginning of many a conversation surrounding who this person was, why he's hanging on one of our walls here, why we have things in this community named after him, and why we should continue to contemplate the ideas that he left us with. So thank you. And I would now like to introduce Tony Glasgow, the Associate Vice President of External Affairs Development and K-12 Operations.
First of all, I really would like to acknowledge Tanya Bailey, and an amazing individual that we are very fortunate to have here at LCC. Early this morning, we received an email from her just encouraging the team. That's what she does. And as a good leader, things will go on whether you're here or not. I'd like to close by encouraging you. Inspiration means you do something with what you've learned, with what you've heard. She provided us with a quote from Malcolm X, and it says, "It is so important for you and me to spend time today learning something about the past so that we can better understand the present, analyze it, and then do something about it." That is inspiration. I would encourage us to not let someone else's history intimidate or threaten your history. It is about all of our history. As I sat there, I'm a product of Chicago in the 60s. As I sat there, I remember moving to Lansing in 1968 and not understanding how a busload of children were treated when they were bused to West Junior. And it was not a busload of black children. It was a busload of white children. And there just happened to be 3 black children on the bus. I seek to understand, and that is what I'm encouraging everyone to do today. I was the first for City of Lansing Human Resources. You would think that in the 80s that would not be the case. My tactic is to educate. My tactic is to help people understand. Because if I label you, judge you, and make assumptions, then I am no better than the people who, through their ignorance, assume things about a particular people group. So let us celebrate every group, and let us learn more about the history that has made the United States as great as it is. Let us not forget, Because if we forget, then it's easy to slip back to the way things used to be. And that is not good for anyone. We must move forward with tolerance, with love, with mercy, and yes, with conviction. So if you are inspired, then I expect to see that each and every one of us will do something with what we've learned today.
Deborah Jones. I am the daughter of Yvonne, who was Malcolm's baby sister. I was 14 when Uncle Malcolm was assassinated. Knew him well. My brother and I spent many times with him at our home in Grand Rapids. And I wanted to say thank you to Lansing Community College. Thank you to the city of Lansing from the family of Earl and Louise Norton Little. This painting is amazing. It's powerful. And I want to just say, I want to recite a poem that I memorized years after Uncle Malcolm passed away. So I've known this poem for over 50 years, but I think it is so appropriate. The author is unknown. You opened our eyes. You taught us to see the beauty of blackness and black unity. There was so much to do in so little time, shot in cold blood while still in your prime, slandered and cursed, yet so few understood that you were our symbol of black manhood. You died like the Savior who died on the cross, a martyr, a prophet, your black brother's loss. Sleep gently, Black Knight. We'll remember you when you walked on this earth, black giant among men. Thank you.
Well, hello, my name is, I was about to say praise the Lord, but I forgot where I was at. My name is Robert Kyle, and we are just a representative from the praise team at Tabernacle of David. And they asked us to sing, lift every voice and sing, but the youth choir over there, they already sung it so well. So if you all can just stand with me, we're just gonna sing the last two. You guys have your, what are these, programs in the back of them. They are the words, and we're going to sing that. You can sing along with us. 1, 2. Stony the road we
Hello, everyone. My name is Angela Matthews. I'm the LCC Board of Trustee, Lansing Community College, and this event today was just absolutely phenomenal. Commemorating the Commission Act, the 400-year African American Commission Act from the 115th Congress. It's important that we remember our history. It's important that we engage and keep engaging. It's important that we educate, because when we do that, we learn more about one another, and we're more open and receptive and receiving of each other.
I'm Robert Proctor, a member of the Lansing Community College Board of Trustees, and I want to thank my colleague on the board, Trustee Angela Matthews, for bringing this to LCC's attention. She spoke last October in New York City to the Association of Community College Trustees African American Caucus about community colleges celebrating the 400 years that persons of African descent have been in what has become the United States of America. This was absolutely fantastic. The turnout was more than I ever expected. Dr. Knight made remarks that I believe ought to be memorialized and placed on the wall. I've already had people asking if they could have a copy, and he's willing to share that. I was tremendously impressed with my colleague, how she orchestrated all of this. It was terrific. and I am very proud to be a member of the Lansing Community College Board of Trustees.
I did notice working in the Capitol that there was very little representation for African Americans, so I was really proud to be a part of that and to be able to create a portrait for Ferguson. I believe that Dr. Knight saw me, and it was actually his idea to paint Malcolm X. I was actually very hesitant about it because of my lack of history and connection to it, and just skeptical of the process and wondering how I could interact with such an icon, or if there was any room for me in the symbolism that Malcolm X represents. I pondered it and found my path to connect with him. And looking at the painting now, I think it worked.
Today especially, I'm very proud to be mayor of the city of Lansing as we recognize the history of the African Americans who were here, some of the bad and the good. We have to talk about all of it and unveil this incredible portrait which shows the pride of Lansing for one of the very important people that grew up here in Lansing and became a national figure.
Now a free man, he spoke of a world where boldness and strength were not just a word, but action and power. And still we desire for better for all, apart we will fall. A man on a mission, a man from a time, a man with a voice, a great one designed, a hope for the future, a tale of our past. Malcolm we salute, spoken from knowledge and stood for the truth. Sweet melody we bring to you, in harmony we dance for you, for Malcolm X. We sing to you, we dance for you, for Malcolm X. Power in defense of freedom is greater than power in behalf of tyranny and oppression, because power, real power, comes from our conviction, which produces action, uncompromising action. Sweet melody we bring to you, in harmony we dance for you, for Malcolm X. Malcolm